Hello and welcome to the Sky News Daily with me, James Matthews, in New Orleans.
And me, Martha Kelner, in Las Vegas.
You're joining us in the States for the first daily of 2025 because we woke up on New Year's Day to news of two suspected terror attacks in two of this country's biggest party towns. What we know so far after this. So, Martha, Happy New Year. We're on opposite sides of the country because in the early hours of New Year's Day, 14 people were killed and 35 were injured when a man drove a pickup truck through the heart of New Orleans French Quarter.
Why is there nobody helping them?
And then just a few hours later, a car filled with fuel canisters and fireworks exploded outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, killing the driver and injuring 7 others.
The FBI is leading the investigation to determine what happened, why it happened, and whether there was any continuing threat to public safety.
We're recording this on what's Thursday night for those of you in the UK. But James, just a couple of days ago, New Orleans, which is a city famous for its parties, was getting ready to welcome in the new year, the biggest party of all. The bars and streets in the city's French Quarter, I imagine, were packed at the time.
Yeah, they were. Bourbon Street, Martha, where this attack took place. It's in the heart of New Orleans' fabled French Quarter. You know, it's a bucket list place for many people to visit. That's why thousands come here year round. There were certainly tens of thousands in town because not only did they come for the New Year party, but there was a big football game in town, the Sugar Bowl. It's a college game between the Georgia Bulldogs and Notre Dame, as we would call them, big event. So it was busy, with people who'd come from across the United States, across the world as well.
So a big couple of days for both locals and tourists there. But it was just after 3 a.m., I think, that calls started coming into the local police.
Yeah, what happened in the heart of the French Quarter was a Ford pickup truck. Now, we've seen the footage. It drives slowly up Canal Street towards Bourbon Street. When it gets there, it took a sharp right turn and instantly accelerates into the crowd that was there at the time. And this vehicle, according to eyewitnesses, drove into people who were in the street at speeds of 60, 70 miles an hour. And it was a scene of utter carnage.
And how quickly were police on the scene, James?
Instantly, we've seen footage of their reaction. And, armed police rushed to the scene upon seeing this horror unfold before their eyes. And indeed, police officers played a part in bringing it to an end. What happened was the vehicle was driven into a crane ultimately. It crashed. The perpetrator, he got out, started shooting at police officers with a weapon, and actually injured two who have been treated in hospital. But in the ensuing firefight, he was killed. And that brought an end to the situation. But of course, it left behind an aftermath that was utterly sickening for those present. The initial death count stood at 10, but that rose very quickly to 14, 15, if you include the perpetrator.
And what do we know about the victims?
We're starting to build a picture of the victims, the people who were there at the time. You look at the CCTV footage, and it's clear that many people had a very lucky escape. It's quite a narrow street, maybe 15 yards wide. This was a big vehicle that was involved. But we've been speaking to the bereaved, people who lost loved ones on that night.
The last thing we ever said to each other, he told me he loved me. So
Tiger Besh was one man who was in town, Martin, to give him his Christian name. We've spoken to his brother Jack, who told us about his brother.
that was my best friend, my role model. Looked up to him, inspired me to do, everything I've done in this life. Inspired my whole family. He was special. He was home for New Year's and Christmas, like I said. We were hunting, fishing, all that. And then his best friend, Ryan Quigley, who was his teammate and best friend from Princeton University, came down whenever I left to be with him. And my brother just wanted to show Ryan New Orleans what it was all about. Ryan has never been here before. So he just wanted to go show them the good spirits and the joy that New Orleans brings, especially on a day like New Year's, just all the smiles and the fun and the good people of Louisiana. And nobody thought it would ever end the way it did. My dad and my mom got to be there with him, put us on a FaceTime call with him. His eyes were closed and he was on a machine, but I know he could hear us. God kept his heartbeat beating for a reason, and I believe it was so that me and my family could tell him goodbye. Forgiving and forgetting are two completely things, but God says you have to forgive no matter if it's who it is. I'm not saying I'm there yet.
So many people, James, with their lives turned upside down so quickly and so violently. What do we know about the suspect in this case?
He's been named as 42-year-old Shamsud Din Jabbar. He was an Army veteran, a US citizen, thought to be living in Texas. There was a picture of him quickly built up, and we've got a handle on his career history. We know he joined the military in 2006. He served in Afghanistan before leaving in 2015. Actually, while he served, he was given a medal for efforts against terrorism. He was said by colleagues to be a great soldier. After he left the military, though, life was a bit more untidy. He had a couple of failed marriages. One of his ex-wives brought out a restraining order against him. He had a criminal record, offences and arrests for theft and driving offences. He had money trouble, so he didn't have a happy life. The FBI tell us that he rented a vehicle on the 30th of December, that Ford pickup truck, drove towards New Orleans, and on the way he recorded 5 videos which he posted to his Facebook account. He spoke about causing harm, thought about harming his family, but he said he didn't want to do that because the media, he said, would not portray it as a war, a conflict between believers and disbelievers. So that gives you an idea of the mindset that he had driving towards this terrorist attack that he was about to commit.
I know earlier in the investigation, New Orleans police and the FBI were looking into potential accomplices. They now have confirmed that he appears to have acted alone and that there's certainly no longer a threat to the people of the city. But they did say there is a potential link to the terror group Islamic State.
Yeah, there were the videos in which he pledged his support to ISIS. There was also an ISIS flag that was flying from the vehicle as he committed this atrocity. The business of the accomplices is interesting. That's now been ruled out by the FBI. Initially, they said that he thought there were connections and they were looking for other people. That stems from improvised explosive devices. There were 2 of them found in the vicinity. Now, Jabbar, he'd laid them in the area before he committed his attack. There were pipe bombs inside coolers and nails, effectively nail bombs, which were designed to be remotely detonated. It's not clear if he tried to detonate them. They certainly didn't go off. But footage showed people in the area showing an interest in these coolers. And of course, investigators saw them showing an interest and thought they might be accomplices of Jabbar. They have since ruled that out. And of course, amidst talk of connections, accomplices, there were fears of a more coordinated attack. Just a few hours after the New Orleans attack, videos emerged online of a Tesla Cybertruck catching fire outside the Trump Hotel in Vegas, Martha. What more do we know about that?
This happened around 8:40 a.m. local time. A Cybertruck, which is one of those ever so distinctive cars from Elon Musk's Tesla company, was parked directly in front of the entrance of the Trump Hotel here on the Vegas Strip. It's this big gold-fronted building. And at first it was sat idle for, several seconds before a series of explosions, and the footage shows bursts of multicolored fireworks shooting all over the place, and then suddenly this thick plume of smoke and a fireball, really. And the fire services and the sprinklers that were in the hotel's awnings quickly extinguished the flames, and the hotel was eventually evacuated. But The scene was like something out of a movie. And that is exactly what Anna, a Brazilian lady who was here on holiday with her boyfriend, Alcides, said that she thought of. She thought this looks like a scene from a film.
When we arrived, we saw fire, and the car was already there on fire, actually. He started filming, and we were able to hear a lot of noises coming out from it. Also, there was a lot of water falling from the ceiling.
Were you scared?
I think nervous is the word. Yeah, we were nervous, like, what is going on? We just came back from New Year's party and a car is on fire? What? We actually thought that it was a scene of a film. That's it. We didn't think that it was real until we heard like 2 more strikes and the last one that smoked the entire area. So, yeah.
I also spoke to another tourist, Alex Rios, who was outside the main lobby area having a cigarette. He was a matter of yards from this explosion when it happened.
What did you see, sir?
I seen the car explode with the fireworks. So it was crazy. It was scary.
What did you think at first? Did you think it was a terrorist attack? Where did your mind go?
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was a terrorist attack, and especially here at the Trump Tower.
Well, at first the hotel staff ran up to him and asked what he had done. And they were telling him they had him on camera, what had he done. And he said, I haven't done anything, I don't know what's going on. And that's when the guy ran off and came running back and said, oh, it's a truck. I didn't realize it. So there was a lot of confusion. I was inside and there was no notification inside. Evidently the fire alarms only worked on the first floor. And I woke up to see on the news that the Trump Tower was bellowing smoke out of the bottom of it. I looked out my window and saw smoke everywhere, tried finding him, called him, and he said he was being taken across the street by the FBI and the police to be interviewed because he was one of about 12 people who had been there right out front and witnessed the whole thing.
And were these events in Las Vegas immediately treated as a terror attack?
No, they weren't initially. And in fact, Eric Trump, Donald Trump's son, posted on X about what he called a reported electric vehicle fire outside the hotel. Elon Musk then posted about his team at Tesla looking into what happened. But it was at a press conference later in the morning that police showed images of the burnt out truck bed, which was packed full of gas canisters, more than a dozen fireworks, clearly suggesting that this wasn't a car fault at all that caused the explosion. It did take the FBI longer to identify the driver of the Cybertruck. He was killed by a gunshot wound to the head, a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but he was very badly burned. So identifying him was done by his military ID card, other forms of ID, tattoos, and body markings.
And Martha, we do know a bit more about the suspect now, don't we?
Yeah, just in the last few hours, James, law enforcement confirming that the man inside the Tesla was Matthew Leibelsberger, a 37-year-old and active duty soldier. And in fact, he was an incredibly successful soldier. He was a member of the elite Green Berets, which is a special forces unit. And he'd served in the army since 2006. He'd spent some time at a base in North Carolina, which was formerly known as Fort Bragg, which is home to a Special Forces command.
All right, thanks, Martha. Let's pause it there for a minute. After the break, we'll discuss why the FBI were looking for links between these two attacks. You're back with me, James Matthews, in New Orleans, and Martha Kelner in Las Vegas. Martha, these two attacks happened on the same day, within hours of each other, in fact. And authorities, they've been looking into whether or not there could be a link.
Yeah, the Las Vegas Police Department said authorities were examining whether the incident here could be connected to the one in New Orleans. And I guess that's to be expected given how close they were, the proximity of time. In a press conference, the Las Vegas sheriff, Kevin McMahill, said that both vehicles appeared to be rented from Turo, which is a car rental app. And a Turo spokesperson said the company was working with the authorities in both cities to help with the investigations. Authorities are also looking into potential military links between the two men. Now, the New Orleans suspect left the army in 2015. The US military has millions of personnel, but they do both appear to have been in what was formerly Fort Bragg in North Carolina at the same time. It's also possible that they served in Afghanistan at the same time too. Of course, this could all just be a coincidence. And in fact, the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, he said that so far they've found no definitive link between the New Orleans attack and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas. But he did caution that that part of the investigation is still in its early stages. Questions then obviously still being asked about how authorities missed what are two potential terror attacks on the same day.
Yeah, attacks like this are thankfully quite rare in the United States. A key part of the investigations going forward, I suppose, will be in establishing whether the suspects were self radicalized or whether there was any kind of direction or enabling from ISIS members or from any other terror group. There are concerns about a rising threat of Islamist terror as a result of ongoing conflict in the Middle East and America's support of Israel. President Joe Biden has said the situation is very fluid. And with these investigations continuing, no one should jump to conclusions.
Yeah, interestingly and perhaps not surprisingly, the future President Donald Trump, rather more forthright in his assessment, he's accused US authorities of failing to do their job properly here. In a post on Truth Social, Trump didn't mention Wednesday's attacks specifically, but he did say that the Department of Justice and the FBI have not done their job, in his words, of protecting Americans. He signed off the post by saying, "See you on January the 20th, make America great again." That is clearly the date of his inauguration. He's also intimately connected with this incident in Las Vegas. You know, this explosion took place outside a hotel bearing his name in a Cybertruck manufactured by Tesla, owned by Elon Musk, who's now his right-hand man.
Speaking of Donald Trump, incidentally, in terms of the New Orleans attack, it was interesting his first response to that. It was a post on Truth Social, and he said this. Now, this is at a time when nobody knew who the attacker was, but he said, "When I said that the criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media, but it turned out to be true." Now, in the wake of the New Orleans attack, that appears to be a clear statement that the perpetrator came from out with the United States. In fact, he was a US citizen. So I'm not sure that Truth Social post stands up to a fact check. And this from the president elect at clearly what was a very sensitive time. That clearly drew a lot of attention from a lot of people. Criticism, too, clearly.
Just a couple of weeks away, James, from Donald Trump taking power again. Do you think the security services are worried that their systems for identifying potential attacks aren't good enough, as the soon-to-be commander-in-chief says?
Well, I think it's an ongoing project, clearly, Martha. But in terms of on the ground security, that's clearly an issue in New Orleans. This was a big Ford pickup truck that was able to drive down Bourbon Street, no less, a crowded Bourbon Street. And it's not the first time we've seen an attack like this. I mean, this has happened before, and we see worldwide bollards and obstacles and barricades at the end of crowded streets. The question is, why weren't there appropriate barricades in Bourbon Street when this attack happened? I put that question to the New Orleans police chief, Ann Kirkpatrick. She denied her force had let the victims down.
Oh, that's not the correct. That's not correct. We would disagree with that. We had
It was
a
plan
security
that allowed an attacker
Well,
to drive into a crowd.
and I take exception to that, and I do not agree with that.
That has
We
to
had
be a failure.
plan. We do know that people have lost their lives. But if you're experienced with terrorism, you would not be asking that question.
Well, with respect, experience of terrorism surely requires appropriate security protection. Since the attack, we have seen beefed up security. Around America, what we've seen now are these yellow wedges on the pavement. So there is a makeshift, more comprehensive barricade in place now as Bourbon Street reopens. It's still a busy place. The crowds are still here for the Sugar Bowl, the big college football spectacle that was postponed for 24 hours. And indeed, we saw football supporters parading down the street, chanting football chants. That was their way of demonstrating that they wouldn't bow to the terrorists. So there is a defiance, a resilience in New Orleans as it pulls out of the horror of the new year. That's it from us and the Sky News Daily today. You can read more analysis on the Islamic State link to the New Orleans attack from our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes on the Sky News website.
Neil Patterson will be back in the host seat from Monday. And if you never want to miss an episode, follow us on your favourite podcast app.
But for now, from myself and Martha, goodbye.